Good afternoon, everybody. And today is the Vendip SaaS Camp session where we'll dive into a topic that every founder pretty much faces at scale. The bigger your company gets, the more or the less control that is you have. So question is, how do you build a self-managing organization or a governance framework that supports decision-making that's decentralized? And the second topic also that we'll talk about will be how do you deal with the fear of losing control as a founder? And our Jedi for this topic today is Sergei Anikin, the man with the power, the CEO of TUUM, and he'll be sharing his concrete lessons about leadership. And these are the ones that he gained while he was playing key roles in these hyper-growth organizations you might have heard of, Pipedrive and Skype, and now in the future as well, TUUM. So Sergei, I'm curious, on average per year, how many Star Wars related puns do you get because of your last name?
Well, every time I travel to US.
There we go. But there's always room for more, but anyways, welcome to this session. Please take it away.
Thanks, Timo. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. So before we go into the topic, I just wanted to build some credibility here. That Timo already introduced me, but just to repeat, I started building Web 2 apps. You know, right now we have also Web 3 apps, so I have to distinguish them. Since '97, worked at Skype, and through Skype, I also had opportunity to collaborate with eBay, PayPal, Facebook, Microsoft colleagues. And then I moved on to Pipedrive. Pipedrive was a very small company, 20 employees, but had a big ambition. During my hiring interview, another Timo Rain, one of the founders, CEO of Pipedrive, asked me, like, Sergei, do you think you can build and scale engineering organization to be as big as Salesforce? And for me, it felt like a bit too big of a challenge, but I said, maybe not as big as Salesforce, but maybe 1/4 of Salesforce. And Timo said, okay, you're hired. Again, maybe not quite 1/4 of Salesforce, but we managed to grow to 900 people. Half of it was engineering team. And also financially, it was quite a nice exit to the founders, but Pipedrive obviously still continue building and evolving and growing under Vista Private Equity Management. And yes, I joined TUUM just recently in summer as a CEO. Now we just celebrated 100 people, 100 employees last Friday. So another milestone. And where this topic is coming from, I guess it's coming from the tension that there are certain ways to organize the company, and most of this knowledge is coming, from being taught in the universities. You go to work for a big corporation and see how these companies are organized, and you mostly see the certain way of organization where you have a hierarchical kind of pyramid scheme, and this is how most of the companies used to manage, and this is what's imprinted in most people's brains, how to scale the company. You hire people, and then you hire managers to manage these people, and there is also some sort of kind of top management which is setting direction and also giving resources to middle managers. Middle managers have to distribute these resources, distribute orders, and then also either punish or reward the so-called frontline employees. And there are emerging other ways to manage companies where you don't actually do this classical pyramid scheme, but you rather remove the middle management layer, and you have mostly the either founders or top management of a company which is setting direction, and then you have a lot of small either individuals or small teams, units who are organizing themselves somehow. And for many people, it's not, it feels like it's a big mess. And they wonder how it's possible to run such company. And also in connection to that, obviously, those people who are very driven by the results and the vision, they want to make sure that people who are working in the company are actually moving in the same direction as they are moving. Anyways, this is the topic which I wanted to address, but I wasn't really sure how to address it. And when I started putting slides together, I realized I want to talk about ways to organize work, which is basically the structure of the company. And it's only one of the topics, like one of the subtopics from a bigger topic, which I first would like to touch here. So when we talk about the success of a company, we usually measure it by achieving, like have company achieved certain results, right? But how to get to these results? You can see the formula. So there is a formula of success. You can do screenshots. You can use it in your future plannings. So how to read this formula? You see on the top so-called integration, which is the capabilities of you, your company, your employees, and then they are using the opportunities on the market. You generate some, let's say, energy. Energy can be money. It can be, I don't know, brand awareness, whatever you can imagine. And this energy, let's say, let's use money as a proxy to energy. This energy gives you ability to feed the next stage, or to keep the company going and growing, right? So, it would be easy, but there is a friction, and let's call it entropy. And entropy is, again, the law of thermodynamics, that any kind of system, like you need certain energy to keep it together. So in our case, when we're talking about the business, you need a certain amount of money to pay to your existing employees, right? So that they don't run away and work for your company. But when we talk about the energy, it's also the time, it's also the right direction, enthusiasm, etc., etc. And you still need some energy, or you will be losing energy if your people are not aligned, for example, right? And this formula is saying that if the amount of energy you're spending on keeping the company afloat and running is either bigger or equal to the energy you are getting from the market, then you will not be able to grow. So it's basically saying that if you're losing too much energy on keeping things smoothly running, then you're actually in trouble. And that's why it's important to talk about different energy drains. And we can distinguish energy drains, either interpersonal, where people talk to each other, but they either don't understand, or have different visions, have different values. That is causing certain energy drain, right? You probably have felt it yourself. Like if you're arguing with people and are not able to get to a common ground, then you're leaving this meeting completely empty and not able to go and, I don't know, sell to the next customer, and not able to go and code your next feature. But on the business level, again, as we are scaling, there are even bigger energy drains, right? And they can be distinguished into three. So your business might have a wrong strategy. So you're like trying to go to market, but your market don't need your product, or you're doing something wrong, right? You have a wrong structure, and then you might have wrong people in the wrong places, or and today I would really like to talk about just structure, because again, these are very big topics, right? We can't cover them in 20 minutes, which left here before I will start asking questions. So just addressing the structure. I hope you understand why wrong structure can be a big problem to a business and how right structure can actually help you win or be successful. So first, what is a structure? So structure is just a breakdown of processes in your company, right? And through this breakdown, it tells which functions have to be performed. Practically speaking, any SaaS company, where SaaS camp right now, so any SaaS company have marketing, every SaaS company have sales, if it's not product-led growth. In Pipedrive, for a long time, we haven't had sales department. Our customer support was performing some of the sales functions partially. It was mostly self-onboarding, like self-serve product. Definitely you have a product, you have R&D or like engineering, support, and then some of the supporting functions like finance, HR, maybe some other like office, etc. So this is a process breakdown, and then also structure can be used to push authority deep down in the structure. So take decisions on places where you have problems, right? So this is how organizational structure is being used. Again, on paper, it's very nice. In practice, you also have some informal structures, right? So we can't avoid it. So this is another example where you have a complete mess instead of a nice classical hierarchical structure. And when if I would be able to talk to you and ask, okay, what problems usually we have in this kind of organization? So a lot of people are saying, hey, people are disengaged, like there are really a lot of long meetings which are non-productive, like people don't know what other people are doing, etc., etc. So there are a lot of troubles, and this is why people are always looking for some new ways to structure organization. So here again, we have like it's not only hierarchy, like there are different ways to organize. So the pyramid is the classical hierarchical structure, but if you have many different divisions, for example, they all might have a pyramid, but then you want to have some sort of cross-functional collaboration, then it's very common to have a matrix structure. I guess by now everyone understands matrix also is not an ideal. Then there is such thing as the hub and spoke. So you might have a big headquarters and then kind of regional, either sales or I don't know, sales and maybe even R&D departments, like smaller spoke organizations, which are each of them responsible for its own and delivering its own part of the P&L, delivering certain revenue results. Inverted pyramid is when people thought, okay, like one person on the top is not able to decide every single small problem which is appearing on the front line. So here people tried to push the decision-making power to the front line. And they kind of inverted the pyramid, saying like the frontline workers are the most important ones. And then there are, but it's important to note that all these four, like pyramid, matrix, hub, and spoke, inverted pyramid, they all have the three layers. So they have a top management, they have middle management, and then they have front employees, front worker employees. But then we also see the so-called progressive structures emerging, and I also want to briefly discuss what these progressive structures are. So the progressive structure is basically a network of small, like a large group of small independent units, and then there is also a top management, small top management on the top, small top management is setting the direction, but then this small independent units, they are doing the work, so to speak. And partially why it became possible to create such structure is because of the progress of communication software. Basically, without automating a lot of communication between these thousands of small units, without providing them the platform for communication and also decision making, it wouldn't be possible to build such structures. So I have also some of the different names. So behind each of those names, there are different companies. To be honest, I don't remember all the names, but I have links. I can provide later on reading materials for this. Some of them can be recognized. So the last one, Squads, is what Spotify was trying to build. Mini factories, there is a company called Favi, which is doing like small factories within a big, large organization. And each of those organizational structures were actually scaling to thousands of employees. So like we have proofs that it's actually working in real world, in real life. Some of them actually had to go back to the traditional organizational structures when they were either acquired or some new management was hired, or they were sold for private equity, for example. And for that, we can actually see that these structures are only possible to maintain if the top management is fully committed to such organizational structure. And when we think of those ways to, or like the access to be organized, so there is a access which is setting the direction for the whole company, and this is done by the top management. But then for the network of small individual units, like there is a need to organize vertically, which is basically dividing functions between different units. And then there is a need to organize horizontally, which is basically agreeing like how to relate to each other, how to communicate with each other. And again, on this slide, you can just see that there are different models. Like it's not only one model, there are different models. And vertically, you can organize either individually or as teams, small teams, units. And then horizontally, you can organize either through collaboration or through competition. And again, on you can see in different kind of cross sections, let's say single individuals competing with each other and competing, for example, for not necessarily for resources, but having some certain internal structure, how they pay and being paid for internal services. This is creating internal market and competition. And one example of this American model is this gaming company, Valve. So they had these individuals competing for certain resources or, I don't know, internal recognition. And then obviously collaboration and single individuals. This is the digital model. This is where you can see like some of the Web3 projects are being organized this way, where usually you have one person who is setting the direction, and then there are a lot of contributors who are working as a community. And I am not trying to argue that one way is better than the other. I think the way you structure your organization have to align with your inner feeling. But there are certain rules how to create a structure which is not draining the energy, right? And there are not many of them, and they are quite easy to comprehend. And the rule number one is, if you change your strategy of your company, you have to rebuild the structure to match the strategy. So that's rule number one. The rule number two, the short-range pressure must not overshoot long-range needs. And one example of this rule is that your sales department always have a short-range pressure to deliver results month over month, quarter over quarter, but your marketing department have to produce long-withstanding brand awareness, right, and brand recognition, and in your structure, you must not put your marketing under sales, report to sales, because if VP of sales is managing marketing department, they will always prioritize their short-range needs over the long-range needs of the marketing. So that's one example. And then third rule is efficiency functions must not overpower effective functions. And under efficiency function, for example, you can think of finance, right? Finance is always thinking how to reduce cost. And effective function is, for example, R&D. So if you put your R&D under the CFO, you probably will get very efficient, but not very effective R&D department. And the last one, but again, not least, centralized functions must not overpower autonomy. And here, let's say, sales function is probably have to be autonomous, especially if you have different geos where you have different sales, different regions where you have different salespeople, and centralized function, let's say the same finance, or I don't know, some strategy function, for example. So, or even HR. So in that sense, they should not, centralized functions should not manage or should not tell autonomous teams what and how they should be doing. And here is a very simplistic way to plan your structure. So basically, the functions, when you're thinking of strategy of your structure, you decide what kind of functions you need to have in your company, which is a process breakdown, right? And then you think where, in which square to put this function. So the short range and effective is do the right thing to get customers. So this is classically the sales, right? Short range and efficient, this might be the let's say finance. Long range, and it's do things the right way for customers. It can be also customer support, for example. Long range and effective, do the right thing for the company. So here goes the marketing, R&D departments. Long range and efficient, keep the company out of harm. So this can be a legal department, for example. And once you allocated these different functions into this, you understand that based on the previous rules of how to structure the company, like who should report to whom. Okay. So this was a theory. Now I would like just to describe how Pipedrive product and engineering organization was organized. And if you remember, we had this definition of a unit where the unit was either individual or a team. So in Pipedrive, we used a third approach where we had a static, like we had dynamic teams within static larger teams, and static larger teams were organized based on the features they were delivering. So it wasn't the Spotify model where there was, so the Spotify splitted people based on their knowledge into chapters, and they had a manager, and then they created dynamic teams which were supposed to deliver certain features. So in Pipedrive, we decided to split organization into teams which were responsible for specific feature area. And these teams were about 20 people. Because we gave them full authority to run this part of the product, they were responsible both for maintaining the existing product, but also building a new one, or like building new features in this area. And this required certain amount of people to keep an eye on the existing product all the time. But that also allowed people to go into dynamic teams and start working on something new. And this was our way to basically scale the organization. I think we had 300 engineers without much of a middle management layer. So each such tribe had one manager which was setting direction for the team, but within the team, the organization of how people rotated between different tasks, different missions, was basically automated by the framework. And this is one of the ways of actually, we embedded this model into the hierarchical overall structure of Pipedrive organization was hierarchical, but within engineering, it was important to give people ability to pick their own work, what they are planning to work today. It was important to also give them authority as much as possible over deciding what to work on. But on the other hand, we still had to keep the overall direction for the company based on our kind of top priorities. So by deciding which teams to fund centrally, but giving the full authority of deciding how and what to build within a team to the team itself, allowed us to keep people engaged, to keep people growing within organization without actually losing much of the control of the company, the direction of the company. I guess I will stop here. I would really like to see if there are any questions.
All right. Thank you, Sergei. This has been a whole lot of frameworks and thoughts coming around this, at least for myself a little bit. And people, I assume that the Q&A works, but please do post any questions that you might have on the Q&A.
I guess people are overwhelmed. So maybe Timo, you can ask your first question.
Yes, I will for sure. Just making sure that people take the opportunity. And if there's something specific in your mind, then please do post it on the Q&A tab. But you mentioned there earlier that kind of this change in strategy requires a change in structure. And I was wondering if you had like a specific example on when you had to do a strategy pivot, and perhaps walk us a little bit through kind of the process of building that organizational structure to support that new strategy then. Is there something that comes to your mind?
Yeah, well, from my personal experience, again, we haven't arrived at this structure immediately, like what I'm showing right now on the screen. So initially we had this notion that teams must own what they're building, right? And we started with small teams, like each engineering team was around 5-6 engineers, a product manager, designer, and they were building their own area of the product. But what we noticed was that every team, they started fresh, they had no existing software to maintain, and they were moving pretty quickly, pretty fast, right? But after delivering 2 or 3 features, like they slowed down because most of their time went on maintaining the existing features. So whenever we wanted to have a new feature, we had to basically form a new team. And so far so good. Like, I mean, it's a decision, right, to invest in the new features. But we ended up with I think over 24 small teams. Each of these teams had their own team lead or team manager. And obviously it's not possible for one engineering manager to manage 24 direct reports who are managing their own team. So we at once created a third layer of managers, right? And this is how basically when you scale your organization, this is how you end up adding more and more layers. And what happened, actually, people felt disengaged. So it was, I think, a perfect storm where a lot of companies on the market got a lot of funding. They started poaching our engineers at Pipedrive. So some people decided to leave, and part of the problem was that they were actually like working in this small team for like 2-3 years. They wanted to do something else, but within such structure, it also was very hard to move across the teams because you have a small, like there are not much capacity or flexibility. Like if you move, then a small team actually feel a great loss. And then you also need 2 managers to agree among themselves, and obviously managers try to kind of hang on their people and not let them go anywhere. So for people, it was easier to kind of leave a company rather than stay and move to another team. So these were major kind of forces which pushed us in this direction, where we removed the team leads layer. We kind of betted on the people's own ability to kind of be adults and become mature people and decide for themselves what they're going to do next. Either build a new feature or keep maintaining, or maybe even join temporary another team and help them build another feature. So we created a structure which was flexible enough for people to become more mature. And I think that also helped A, to motivate people, and B, to scale the organization without actually adding more management layers. I don't know if that answered your question, but
no, it did, and to me, it feels that I'm hearing over and over again this autonomous kind of way of letting people do what they love, do what they like, and that obviously keeps them engaged and keeps them kind of performing at their highest level when they're doing something that they have control over and they can kind of decide on where to go with it. And and related to that, actually, there was a question that's the most upvoted here is kind of going through the Pipedrive organization here at the end, or engineering structure here. So what are the downsides that you would identify with that?
Well, one very strong downside is that if you hire immature people who are not able to kind of take responsibility for their own, then that will definitely fail. So what we have, as you can see on the side, there is a coaching bubble. So we actually also hired personal coaches for people to kind of come with their personal problems and solve them within like we had professional personal coaches within engineering organization to enable such kind of model. So in that sense, and that is coming back to the question of control, right? Because and trust, like, do you actually trust and believe that people are doing their best while they're working for your company? And if you don't believe and don't trust in people, then it will not be possible to create such organization, because you will always be feeling nervous. So basically what I'm saying is you have to mature yourself first.
Yeah.
Before you can create such organization.
Yeah, you'll be run on fear instead of kind of letting people do what they love. Another question related to this is kind of how did you do task prioritization with these kinds of teams, and who kind of held the responsibility for making the kind of prioritization list of things to be worked on, and what's most important for the team?
Well, I don't do task prioritization, obviously. Like on the top management level, you're really looking at the cost structure of the company, right? The cost structure, and also then revenue. Does this cost provide you enough revenue or future revenue, right? So basically, we stop at the level of deciding: do we need to hire more people? Do we need to create more capacity in the organization based on the opportunities on the market? And
Okay.
then, yeah.
In terms of these autonomous teams, though, like who within them that are building or maintaining these features, for instance, who kind of decides on what is done within those teams?
So it really depends how big is the task, because as I mentioned, this model was embedded into the hierarchical, hierarchical organization, where some functions still need some sense of control. Let's say security, for example, or legal. So sometimes you build this control around the processes within this team. So you can see this mission. I think the mission was the key kind of component of this framework, and mission had a clear definition. So it was we can call it a project, right? But the projects can be run differently. So in our case, when people started the project, they really went on a mission to deliver something. And that meant that they are flying to the moon. And if the team is flying to the moon, you can't really call them and say, hey, please come back. I want eggs to be fried. And then you can continue flying to the moon. So in that sense, we let them fly to the moon while others on the base or launch pad were frying eggs and cleaning their weapons. So in that sense, there was a distinguished start and end of the mission, and certain routines associated with starting and ending the mission, right? And these were the places where also other parts of organization were able to hook in and say, okay, you can't actually land your mission before you do a security check-in, for example. Or you cannot start the mission before, I don't know, it has been prioritized and agreed, yes, that is the most important mission, right? Although we only did that during the crisis when COVID hit, and then we established kind of a central body of deciding which mission should be launched. Otherwise, like the decisions to launch a mission was done within a tribe because they are responsible for the success of their part of the product.
Right, right. So in crisis situations, you would kind of override a little bit the kind of mission-driven way of doing it.
Well, it's still a mission, right? But we just prioritize which missions. And again, this structure, because it's flexible, like you can actually, it allows you to reallocate people dynamically because there is a there are more people in the team than you need to just maintain the system. Always, you can actually say, okay, guys, today or next year, it is more important that we put all of our available resources into this area, right? Not that everyone in the other areas will be happy because you still have product managers, designers working on those, but at least there is flexibility in the system.
Okay, makes sense, makes sense. Another upvoted question. People, thanks for the questions. This is really great. We already got quite a few. Please upvote the ones that you feel like are most relevant. I'll take those in the order of kind of most upvoted. So the next one is kind of what KPIs did you use for adjusting the organizations for growth, and at what point did the leadership realize that you need to change these KPIs?
Mm-hmm.
For organizations?
Yeah, the KPIs is or let's say the data is one important part or attribute of autonomous kind of self-managing teams because of a feedback, right? Feedback loop. So basically, you don't use data to drive the behavior, but you use data to take decisions. And it's also within the tribe, but also or within the autonomous team, but also outside of the team, right? To understand what's going on with the team, right? And it's important also to understand that no data is also data, right? It's basically saying, okay, like we are flying blind. What kind of data we need to understand? Like, are we flying at least in the right direction? And this data can be precise, it can be, or like very granular, it can be very high level. So for me, maybe also it's important to note that there is a notion which is called sense making, right? So it's not about hard data which you can collect through, I don't know, for engineers, it's not number of lines they have committed, right? Or like, it's not the hard data, but the data which you can collect from people, right? So and it can be as easy as asking people, I know, every week, are we moving in the right direction, right? And if you get beyond certain threshold of number of people saying no, that's already a data which is telling you, okay, something is wrong. Now we need to understand better what is going on, right? And for me, the sense-making type of data was actually retrospectives of teams. So we had, from the very beginning, we had a culture where every team did weekly or bi-weekly retrospectives, how team was doing, and it was public to everyone, so everyone was able to read them. And through those notes, it was very actually easy to understand what's happening in organization.
Yeah, got creative with gathering the data. I guess you need to, especially for engineering organizations, or not, perhaps.
I mean, there are tools to gather the hard engineering data. I don't want to talk about it because, like, there are tools, right? You just take a tool. If you feel that you need to measure something, just take a tool and measure it. The question is what you're going to do with this data.
Exactly. Very good. Next question. So, very simple one, especially I think related to an organization where you're looking for people who can thrive in autonomous situations. How do you avoid hiring the wrong people?
Well, you look at competencies and you look at soft skills, and you look also at alignment with your vision, right? So, I mean, competences, we all know how to measure. One key here is actually, if you want to hire a really competent person, you ask not how to build stuff, but how to break stuff. Because if he understands how to break something which he's supposed to build, he really knows how to build it. And then the soft skills, again, you just have to assess what kind of soft skills you need for this specific role, right? And then you can understand based on some obvious and non-obvious evidence, right, from the person. But I think it's also very important that people are aligned with what the company is doing. I mean, at least moderately interested, right? And please don't hire people who say they are very, very fantastically optimistic about what you're doing. It's usually a bad sign. It usually means they are lying. So people have to be moderately interested, and also they need to have some personal interest. Like, don't ask why you are, like, ask what is your personal interest in doing what we are doing, right? So it have to be personal to him. So
if they're too excited, then they're obviously lying.
Well, they might not be just aware of themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Hi. Next question is in terms of creating systems on the new level, on the management level. How much creating of new system did you do on kind of the management side, and when did you start involving other people in the organization?
So so you need certain rules and or framework how this type of organization is working, right? But to get the biggest engagement from the people and the teams, you actually outsource or give them possibility to design the system, right? So basically, you're just setting very generic kind of meta rules, what you want to see, but all the details you outsource to the people who will be parts of this system. So you actually don't even need to design it yourself. You just say, hey, I need this system, please design it for me. And people will be happy to create a workplace where they want to actually work in.
So you basically just outline what you need and set people on with this task list to move. Makes sense. This is actually an interesting question. So what was the most difficult reorganization that you had to do? And I think the interesting part is are reorganizations avoidable in general in an early stage company?
I don't know, have you seen this? Some couple of years ago, I saw some weird Japanese show where you have a team of like 4 people on the stage, and then there is a wall which is moving towards them, and there are different kind of shapes, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't fit this shape, then you will be kind of pushed over to water or something. So for me, you kind of fitting this wall or the empty shape is the organization of, like, you have to reorganize every time you feel it's not working. So the moment you feel that there is a certain energy drain somewhere in the system, you have to find it and remove it and fix it. And this is fixable only through reorganization. And why it's crucial, I think that's the only job of the top manager, to find these energy drains. Because if you're not doing that, and at some point, like, there is a law of entropy where they are accumulating over time, and at some point all of your energy or company energy and resources will go into trying to keep this organization together, not producing any new things.
Yeah. That's very likely. It's every organization at some point, not even likely, I'd say very, very certain almost, that they will end up in a situation where they have an energy drain somewhere in the organization, and they need to kind of address the situation and make adjustments based on that.
And the good news is that people actually get energy from the changes.
Yeah.
So you should actually look for opportunities to change organization, not kind of try to avoid it.
Is that always the case? I mean, I can imagine kind of on a company level, but I suppose individually that might differ from individual to individual quite strongly, and also what their kind of role perhaps and how their personality fits the new organization.
Well, definitely, if something is working really, really well, you shouldn't touch it, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to break everything around it.
Yeah. That's true. All right. Also, I mean, perhaps I'll take the second part as well. I mean, is there a most difficult reorganization that comes to mind in your career so far, and something specific that you felt like you learned?
It's probably not the most difficult, but I would say it was the most impressive. So that was when private equity acquired Skype from eBay, and there was a quite long planning period, let's say 6 months. There was assessment of the situation and then planning how to reorganize. But the execution was very impressive. So basically, once the plan was laid out, the plan had only roles, but not names, right? And then one morning, people received the notification that, hey, there is a new org structure, and you basically have to apply to those positions. And the interesting part was that there were less roles than the people in the organization. That also created some kind of competition.
There's a competitive element there for sure. Mm-hmm. Right, we have a couple of minutes still left here. So I'll take the last question here. It's a very specific one, I suppose. So regarding teams, so did every team have their own microservices? Is the question here. I'm not exactly sure what's meant by that, but maybe you can. Does that? Is there something you can flash?
Yeah. So so microservices architecture is some people claim that it's used to distribute the load across the system, and some people, including me, are claiming that it is used to scale the organization, because like you can't have possibly 100 people building or 1,000 people building the same component or changing the same component at once, right? Although Facebook managed to do that. So they apply a different strategy, but usually the microservices architecture is used to scale the organization so that you can give each team or tribe a set of microservices. And yes, in our case, tribe owned a set of microservices or components, as we call them. And there was one good indication when tribe had to split, when the number, like when one person was not able to comprehend all the components which tribe was owning, it was a good sign. Again, talking about the data and KPIs, it was a good sign that maybe the ownership of this team grew too much, and now we need actually 2 tribes instead of 1. If that makes sense, Timo.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, that's a good trigger for you to start thinking about when a tribe has grown too big, or a team has kind of outgrown its limits, and it needs to kind of split into 2, or some reorganization is needed there once the entropy increases. So hey, there's a lot of thank yous here on the Q&A, and I'm sure we can actually share these with you. So I echo those. Thank you, Sergei, so much for this. We're out of time, and we're really thankful that you were able to share your thoughts around this topic, and kind of guide us through your experience and how you've seen these things. And like said, everybody will be posting this online and on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and we will be then sharing these slides on there as well, so you can have a chance to take a look at these with Sergei's permission, of course. And so join us for the next time on Wednesday. But for now, Sergei, thank you so much for your time, and all the best of luck with TUUM and all of your future ventures.
Thanks, Timo. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.